Hello everyone, I'm Amy Pham, the gallery manager of the Woodlands Art Gallery Studios, and today we have our featured artist, Cynthia Reid. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So before we begin the interview, can you talk to me about the work you have with us today?
Sure. So this piece started several years ago as a watercolor, actually watercolor with ink, and I was in a workshop and I never finished it. You know, I got the sky part and, well, you can see what I got done. And I kind of liked it as a start to something, but couldn't really figure out what to do with it, so I just put it in a drawer. And then about 4 years ago, I took a class in paper weaving. And after I got, you know, I got a paper pack from the instructor with, you know, really pretty papers. But after I used those up, then I was just always looking for something else to weave. And I have these flat files full of, you know, projects that were never finished or that I never liked, or, you know, or just really old. And so this was one of the ones that I pulled out. It's kind of hard to slice it into strips, but that's what I did. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I only sliced from here down, and I wove this part with white rice paper. And then I decided to put a little, kind of like a little shading in the cloud. I thought the blue was really pretty. So it's one of the few where I've just woven little sections rather than the whole thing being woven.
I mean, I really love the contrast of this color versus the whiteness of this part of the work.
Thank you, because you know, for the longest time I thought, you know, how am I going to finish this? I can't leave it white. And then I thought, well, it's like a snowy winter day.
Yeah.
I mean, a beautiful clear sky winter day. So I did just weave it with white and leave it white.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic and I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for the first question, I know that you were born and you lived in this a small town in upstate New York, and you ultimately moved to Texas and completed your degree in art education at Sam Houston State University. So I was just curious, how did art weave its way into your life as a kid, as an adolescent, and what was it about Texas that drew you to it?
Okay, well, I did grow up in a small town, Blauvelt, New York. Technically it is upstate because it's north of New York City, but it's only about 20 miles north of the city. My grandparents lived in the city. We went into the city a lot. My parents were, you know, museum goers. I remember going to the ballet with my dad when I was like 5. And so, you know, it was always kind of cultural. And I took art classes as a kid, of course in school, but also we had an art foundation where I went for mostly ceramics classes.
Oh, wow.
And so I always took art, junior high, high school, and school. And then when I graduated, I went to Syracuse University first, and I was an English major. It just never occurred to me that I could like make art and do anything with that. So I don't know what I thought I was going to do with an English major either. I just thought, well, I like to read. I think I'll be an English major. So I took then, near the end of my time in Syracuse, I took several art classes for non-majors, and then I really enjoyed them. And then I thought, oh yeah, art. I really like art.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of a long story that I won't go into, but I went to Colorado with my college roommate and a high school friend of hers. And I met my ex-husband, my first husband, who was from Texas. And we eventually got married in Colorado. And then it was, he was a carpenter, and there was a building moratorium. And I was being a waitress, and you know, it just didn't look like we had a future there. He was born and went to school in Waco, but then he went to college at Sam Houston. And so we came to Texas mainly so I could finish college and major in art ed, because he asked me, what are you going to do, be an artist? And I heard myself say, no, I'm going to be an art teacher, which I really hadn't thought much about, but it seemed like it turned out luckily to be a really good thing for me. I really enjoyed it. Was that anything what you asked me?
Absolutely. There has to be. I mean, I know that you probably, when you were younger, you probably didn't see yourself moving to Texas. And
No, and actually when we moved here, it was just so I could finish school, and then I wanted to move back to New York.
Oh, I see.
But it was easy to get a job here,
Yeah.
and then then we had a baby, and then I had friends, and I just stayed here.
Yeah.
And
Suddenly,
once you get really connected in the community, then it's hard to move to a cold place.
Yeah. I mean,
Although I'd rather be in a cold place this week. This has been
I know.
pretty
Yeah.
hot.
Right. The heat, summer heat, is practically unbearable. Yeah. So your earlier works focused on old buildings and architectural details, and your time and effort as a Texas master gardener shows some connection you have to nature and the environment. Can you tell me a bit more about how you got to this place that you're at now and the connection you have for various components of nature?
Sure. So, well, for one thing, when I moved to Texas, I'd been living in Colorado, and I got here and I kind of looked around and thought, well, this is pretty unspectacular. Where are the mountains?
Yeah.
So I wasn't really entranced by the landscape, and I kept going home to visit to New York, and I had started to work on my MFA, and I just actually, I went to Europe with a class, an art history class, and when I got home, and this was back when we had film, and I developed all my rolls of film, they were all of buildings. And I was, it's almost like someone else took the pictures. I was surprised.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, I love architecture. I love old buildings. So I started painting them, and then that became my master's thesis. It was called The Portrayal of Age in Architecture Through the Watercolor Medium. So that's how I started painting buildings. And I painted buildings for 20 or 25 years. Eventually, I just really got tired of holding a photograph in my left hand and painting with my right hand. And so at that point, I actually was in a summer program that Texas Tech had out in Junction, Texas, and surrounded by the river and nature and everything. And I started painting still lifes there, just like setting stuff up on the table. And I just wanted to do something observational where I wasn't looking at a photograph.
Yeah.
So I really kind of started with still life. And then I met my husband, and he's also an artist, and he was very much a painter of the landscape as well as a real outdoors person, camping and hiking and everything like that. So I always liked being outdoors, but I hadn't ever really done much camping. So we did some of that and some painting on location, and I started to like it. And then I just really, we bought our property in Willis. We live on 6 acres. And to me, it's very beautiful. We have a pond, we have wooded areas, we have pastures. There's all sorts of, native plants and wildlife. And I kind of adopted the philosophy that, okay, so when you look out over the horizon, you don't see any mountains. But if you look up close at things, there's a lot of really interesting details.
Yeah.
Like light coming through the trees and the patterns it makes. Or especially water. I love to paint water, whether it's the surface of a pond or a river or the ocean, And even in my ocean paintings, rarely do I do like a whole vista. It's usually just focused in on the water and what the reflections and the movement.
Yeah. So your upcoming exhibition sounds captivating, especially with the fusion of repurposed watercolors, handmade papers, and my personal favorite, unique vintage black and white woven photos. Could you delve into the artistic process behind weaving these distinct elements together to create this cohesive and visually striking presentation?
Sure. So I don't know if I've already mentioned that I took this paper weaving class. I should say that the instructor was Helen Hebert. She's a Colorado artist, paper maker, genius at anything to do with paper.
Yeah.
So that's where I got started with it. And then, like I said, I wove a lot with decorative paper, and I started looking for more things to weave with. And she suggested some kind of, like weaving with maps, and she mentioned old photographs. And, years ago, I was an antique dealer and went to estate sales. And at some point, I had bought a lot of, I had a big box full of black and white vintage photographs, most of them of people that I have no idea who they were.
Yeah.
And, they're old photographs. And I didn't have, back then I thought, well, when I was an antique dealer, maybe I was thinking about reselling them in some form. But then I thought, well, maybe I'll collage them. But then with the weaving class, I thought, I could weave those.
Yeah.
So I tried that, and I just really liked it. So some of them, the ones that are the most fun to me is when I take two different photographs and weave them together.
Yeah.
So the people in this photograph are now with the people in the other photograph.
Yeah.
And that's really fun. But then others might just be woven with some other really pretty paper there's, I can't show you on this one because I didn't do it, but on a lot of the weavings, I might cut a window out so you can see what's the layer underneath.
Oh, I see.
And that's fun to do with the photographs because you might have a piece of paper going over somebody's face, but then you can cut a window and then see their face.
Yeah. Whenever we went to your studio, just to get to know you and to look at your art and your work, and I saw those vintage black and white woven photos, and looking at them, I had a similar experience similar to when people look at Mark Rothko works, just kind of entranced in it and enamored, and in a way I was sort of overwhelmed, but also entranced by the photos, and I really appreciate the experience. And
Thank you.
Personally, they're my favorite. So.
Well, and they have such a feeling of mystery about them because you don't know the people and you wonder, I always wondered, why are people throwing away these family photos?
Yeah.
Of course, you have so many. And But I always wonder about the people in the pictures.
And I wanted to ask if you could share some insights on the unique challenges and rewarding aspects of using watercolor as your primary medium.
Well, I just love watercolor. I love how it looks. I like the fact that it's not totally predictable. I have some control over it, but you'd think after this many years I'd totally be able to control. And sometimes people will ask, or maybe students will say, I had this idea in my mind that I was going to paint, and when I got done, it didn't look like that. And that happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
It never turns out exactly how I pictured it, but a lot of times it turns out to be more than what I had pictured. So that's a quality of watercolor that I really like. And I just like how it looks.
And lastly, I wanted to ask you, what are you working on now, and what can people expect to see?
Well, I'm working on all sorts of things now. I'm still painting watercolors, and I already told you I really like to paint water, and my most recent work in watercolor is seascapes. But I'm also, looking for more things to weave, and I'm getting ready for several holiday markets. And so I'm doing some small pieces, get some different price points. And I really need to get on it because,
They're coming up.
It seems like, oh, that's so far off, but it isn't. So that's what I really need to be working on is stuff. I'll show paintings there too, but quite honestly, it's the small stuff that sells at the markets because people are looking for gifts. So,
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We've had a great time. I had a great time just talking to you, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And everyone, please come to our exhibit and go on all of our social media to check it out. And the exhibit will be on September 21st. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. See you all there.